Chapter 6. Building the Product Backlog. Even before the roles are filled or time boxes are arranged, the product owner will need to build a product backlog with the business's desired feature set. Kicking off a project without a project backlog is like setting it up for a fall. It usually results in forcing a team to generate work for themselves while the backlog is built. On top of that, it leaves them without clear priorities for a period of time. Obviously, neither of these are useful ways to put a team of experts to good use. Many product owners know this straight away, but the Scrum Master may need to coach some on the importance and urgency of this. As previously mentioned, a product backlog is nothing more than a list of the features that the product owner desires for the final product. This, of course, is based on the business's requirement. Ideally, the product owner will build a list compiled of user stories, explained later in this class. This list should be finished and presented to the team, ready for estimation. This is not always done as urgently as needed. Usually, either a product owner's busy schedule, lack of understanding, need for more coaching, or a mixture of all cases can delay the timely delivery of a product backlog. Therefore, I will explain what I have observed in the industry most frequently. I will also explain my personal approach to dealing with these situations. If the product owner can manage and create the backlog in a timely fashion, then some of the Scrum Master-related preparation will not be necessary. First, let us explore the basic elements of a product backlog. User story and acceptance criteria. User story writing is a topic unto itself, but since it is a usual part of creating a product backlog, I will introduce the key concepts. User stories, the 3 R's. Although not a Scrum artifact strictly speaking, in industry each product backlog requirement is usually maintained in the form of a user story. A user story is a description of a requirement from a user's point of view. The idea is that delivering value to the user will result in high return on investment, and a great product. Therefore, a user story helps to give the whole Scrum team the correct focus. User stories are usually written on 3 by 5 inch cards, small enough to carry and pass around the team, but large enough to write a description and acceptance criteria on. User stories typically use the following convention. As a role, I want requirement, so that reason, that is, return on investment. I call this the 3 R's of story card writing. The role focuses everyone on what type of user the feature is aimed at. The requirement explains what the user should be able to do. The reason, ROI, explains what the value is to the user and therefore to the business. This third point is often overlooked, but in my experience it can add tremendous value and help the product owner to avoid adding useless features from a user's point of view to the backlog. If there are cases where the story description speaks for itself in the first 2 points, then the third can be omitted. If we're building a mobile Formula 1 game, an example of a user story would be, as an F1 game player, I want to see a circuit map so that I know where I am on the circuit. Acceptance criteria. The purpose of acceptance criteria is to articulate precisely when the user story is done from the product owner's perspective. They should translate into acceptance tests that a tester or quality assurance tester can use to verify the quality of a feature. A tester should be involved in writing them, but it is a product owner's responsibility to produce them. Agile business analysts are very helpful in assisting product owners and extracting the right information for user stories. The template I use for writing acceptance criteria is: a role should see or be able to do the following. Acceptance criteria 1, 2, 3, etc. Edge cases 1, 2, 3, etc. This is a simple bullet-pointed list of criteria. It's nothing complex and neither should it be. All that is needed is a set of logical criteria that can be used for tests. Also note that Edge cases are separated out. This is not a necessity, but in my experience, it helps to force thinking of tricky situations that may arise. An example of writing acceptance criteria using this template is: an F1 game player should see a track that, as closely as possible, resembles the shape of the F1 track in the game, consists of a graphical circuit line that fits within a 3x5 proportioned box, has a small dot to represent the game player's car. The dot should move in relation to and in proportion to the game player's position on the track. Edge cases. If the car blows up, the dot should turn red for 1 second, then disappear. Based on these tests, designs, and an actual implementation of a circuit map can be made. Please note that the stories above assume that the designers and user interface designers will work with the team to fine-tune exact positioning, look, and feel. In the real world, teams will likely ask for clarification and some more detail where necessary. I suggest that the product owners use this as a chance to maximize the value of process by fine-tuning the criteria to the level that the team needs. Organizing stakeholder meetings. Product owners may be in need of assistance to build the backlog, and it is a Scrum Master's role to help them achieve this if there are impediments. If the impediment is lack of timely stakeholder input, the product owner will need to ask the stakeholders for such input. Where this is becoming an issue, the Scrum Master may need to arrange and facilitate routine meetings to prompt communication and aid requirements gathering. Stakeholder meetings are held when we have a number of stakeholders with a vested interest in the product who also have conflicting or related views on the requirements. The Scrum Master may organize the meeting to debate the requirements, and the product owner will make the final decision as to which features make it into the product backlog. This can prove tough in reality since the stakeholders can consist of heads of department, product vendors, creative directors, and other people with different but equally important perspectives. To be clear, the Scrum Master is not required to organize these time boxes unless it will solve an impediment for the Scrum team. However, in reality, the constraint of time often requires things to work this way. Finding common ground. In a Scrum Master-led stakeholder meeting, the Scrum Master will need to exercise the skill of time boxing and often negotiation or persuasion. This is usually to make sure that everybody gets an equal chance to put their points across and that the meeting stays focused. For example, where product designs are concerned, different stakeholders may have different ideas and different reasons why the product should be visualized in a specific way. Ultimately, it is part of the product owner's role to listen to each point, put forward his or her own point, and finally make a decision. In the heat of the debate, meetings can often overrun and tempers can sometimes flare. A Scrum Master can be impartial voice of reason in these situations. In short, debate is always healthy, but the outcome of the meeting should be a product owner decision on specific features within product backlog. Managing changing requirements. Ultimately, it is the product owner's role to manage changing requirements in the process. This means that once a backlog is established, there will usually be ongoing maintenance, additions, deletions that need to be carried out. If these do not happen in time for the sprint planning sessions, the Scrum Master will need to step in to assist. This is because Scrum actually manages changing requirements in terms of sprints. The team need a number of user stories to be ready for them to work on before the sprint begins. Therefore, a Scrum Master needs to make sure that the process is working for it to be effective. He may need to arrange necessary meetings, as previously mentioned, to make sure that the right people are in the right place at the right time to get final decisions made. Alternatively, he may need to arrange meetings directly with the product owner, such as a pre-planning meeting to prepare for the upcoming sprint. Prioritization. Prioritizing involves using the value of a feature, business value or return on investment, to decide where its user story sits in the backlog. Stories that are more valuable sit at the top and stories that are less valuable sit at the bottom. The product owner will need to decide what value means for the product. That is it revenue, user likability, sales in the first month, magazine ratings, or all of the above? From experience, the priority is a mixture of all of the above. However, since all products have a user, the user experience benefit usually dictates the story's value. Many product owners will already know this, but the Scrum Master can assist product owners who are new to this concept in understanding and realizing the value of prioritization. With paper story cards, ordering the stack is, of course, enough to show priority. However, there are a number of software tools that allow us to create virtual stories. With software story cards, I recommend using drag and drop, or if that is unavailable, a relative scale. Usually 1 to 50 is enough, but even 1 to 100 works for huge backlogs. The highest priority item can be numbered 100 and the lowest 1, for example. It does not matter as long as the product owner can quickly and easily change the priority of any item in the backlog to give it a visual order. The highest value items can then be picked up for the oncoming sprint. Capturing stories in meetings. Whether acquired through meetings or otherwise, the end game is a product backlog composed of user stories. Therefore, I recommend that a product owner is prepared with 3 to 5 story cards as described in this class, or access to any story card capturing software at all requirements gathering meetings to be most efficient. That way, requirements make it directly into the backlog. The responsibility to manage the backlog lies with the product owner. The Scrum Master is, of course, around to coach, facilitate, and remove any impediments to backlog management as needed. Story points. Once prioritized, the team will need to estimate the backlog. See my sections on sprint planning, release planning, and backlog grooming. And the most common unit for doing this is the story point. Story points are a unit for measuring the relative size of a user story. Story points are not a measure of time, but are proportional to time. In other words, a user story with a higher number of story points would typically take longer than one with a lower number. One popular scale, and the one I recommend for estimating story points, is the Fibonacci scale. It is named after the mathematician who was credited with spotting this numerical pattern in nature. Actually, the number sequence was observed in Indian mathematics prior to this. The pattern has been observed as the rate or pattern by which many natural things, such as branches on trees or petals on flowers, grow. They follow a number sequence as follows: 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. Adding the first 2 numbers together gives the next one. From that point on, adding any number to its predecessor gives the next number in the sequence. In short, studies have shown that these particular numbers marry well with the way we compare relative sizes, and therefore they became popular for estimating. Further to this, it is thought that as requirements become vaguer or more complex to translate into reality, it is more difficult to estimate the amount of effort involved in solving the problem. Therefore, the higher numbers in the sequence roughly double instead of following the Fibonacci sequence. Agile planning poker cards are the artifacts used to estimate user stories, and they use the numbers below: 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 40, 100, where 1 is the smallest in relative size and 100 is the largest. A 40-point story would be roughly twice the size as a 21-point story. To clear up a common point of confusion, a story point is not purely a measure of complexity. It is a measure of effort. The size of a story can increase because it is highly complex, that is, an algorithm for an airplane simulator, or just because it involves many simple pieces of work, such as 100 hours of cut and paste. What a joy! Uncertainty also inflates the estimate since it represents an unknown quantity of effort. All of these different forms of effort are represented by the story point unit, which is what makes it so powerful. In the end, the key thing is that story points are proportional to the time a story takes to complete relative to other stories in a backlog.